All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for the third Moaa webinar of the school year, Developing an Executive Presence. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items that I would like to make you aware of. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you have renewed your Moaa membership and signed up for the Moaa Symposium in June, and encourage your colleagues to do so as well. Just as a reminder, if you haven't logged into the Moaa community, I encourage you to do so as well. The community is the primary location for many helpful resources. To access the community, simply visit moa.nacta.com. If you have any questions regarding Moaa membership in general, please don't hesitate to contact either Alexa Scott or Julie Work in the national office at 440-892-4000. Now, for today's webinar, if you have any questions throughout the course of the live webinar, feel free to contact either Alexa Scott or Julie Work in the national office. And also, feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom right of your screen. Please note there will be a brief question and answer session at the conclusion of today's webinar, and the majority of questions will be addressed during that time. Today, we are extremely fortunate to have Dr. Sharon Beverly, Dr. Richard Williams, and Dr. Denisha Hendricks with Beverly Associates Consulting firm. Dr. Beverly is a nationally recognized leader with more than 25 years of excellence in higher education. She owns the distinction of being named ECAC Female Administrator of the Year while at Vassar, a state and conference coach of the year at Farley Dickinson, and an assistant coach of the United States Olympic Festival. She also was named one of the top 30 women in higher education by Diverse Magazine in 2014. Dr. Beverly possesses both faculty and administrative experience and earned her doctoral degree in leadership for higher education from Capella University. She is a past president of Moaa. Dr. Williams is a tenured professor, has over 20 years of experience in academics and athletics within the collegiate ranks. An eminent scholar in the field of neuromuscular physiology and minority health disparities and policy, Dr. Williams has published numerous books, editorial volumes, electronic books, peer-reviewed and non-referred publications. Dr. Williams is a former athletics director and Moaa board member who earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees from Georgia. Dr. Hendricks is the recipient of the 2012 Auburn University Young Alumni Achievement Award, where she earned both her master's and doctorate. She holds over 16 years of distinguished experience in academics and athletics, and has served on a wide range of NCAA committees and led both Kentucky State and Chicago State athletics departments. We are fortunate to have all of them with us today, and we'll turn the program over to Dr. Beverly for a brief introduction. Dr. Beverly, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Darnell, and we really appreciate that wonderful opening that you gave us. You know, we are so pleased and honored to be a part of the Moaa webinar series, and we want to thank everyone in attendance for their time as well. We thought that it might be a good idea to take the topic and sort of divide it into 3 stages of your career, just at the beginning, trying to start out and establish that executive presence, and Dr. Williams is going to cover that, and then Dr. Hendricks is going to step in and talk about when you're in sort of that mid area of your career and you're trying to maneuver that landscape, and then I'm going to step in and talk about the experienced athletics administrator that's got more than 10 years. We don't want to age you, experience, and you're thinking about some other things. So that's the way we divided it up. Although we are a new firm, we bring a lot of experience, which you shared, so we're really honored and pleased to be a part of this series. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams to start us off. The ball's in your court.
I believe now you should be able to hear me. Today we want to talk about creating an executive presence. And in creating this executive presence, we're going to talk about the principles and priorities during the onboarding process. I want to make sure that you think about what we're saying. I want you to internalize it and feel it. And then last but not least, I want you to make sure and get it done. Next slide, please. Okay. In this slide, the first thing that first step that we want to do is talk about the principles of onboarding. And on this onboarding, you need to understand the initial steps of understanding this decision making. With this decision makings, there are going to be some alternatives, of course, some uncertainty, some high risk consequences, and some complexities. But in all of this, you need to understand the who, the what, the where, the why, and to what degree. Next slide, please. Realizing who you are, that's the most important thing that you need to do. I love this show on Sunday night. I'm quite sure millions and millions of people understand this show. It's called The Games of Thrones. And similar in athletics, it's a game of who's going to be on top in some instances. But as Shakespeare says, to thine own self be true. So to realize who you are, you have to make sure and embrace your unique value. We all have a value added to ourselves, but we must make sure we understand it and others understand it as well. As well as we must be self-aware and confident in your ability, as we refer to that as the gravitas. No one can do it just like yourself, and we need to understand that and believe that within ourselves. I also like the next thing to realizing who you are, you need to be consistent. And what I mean by consistent in listening, consistent in thinking, and before you do, after the listening and thinking, then I would encourage all to speak. But before, sometimes we always have as I would sit there and say, formulate a response. And once we formulate the response, the listening and the thinking goes out the door. So I need to make sure we're aware of being consistent. Not only that, a silent presence. It's often said that the power of silence is the importance of being present. So again, before we speak, before we state things, we need to make sure and understand that of being silent. Last but not least, we need to understand our goals, moving towards your goals, and understand that your goals have boundaries. And one thing about these goals, that they're forever changing. And so we must be a forever changing creature as well. Next slide, please. Next, we understand the who. Now we need to talk about the what. What should I do when making the local connections? I like to consider this a part of the 5 C's in making those local connections. First is composure. And understanding composure, you need to be emotionally controlled. And not only you yourself are emotional control, but recognize the emotions of others. And that's the key to managing your response. The second C is charisma. That's the ability to draw others and to maintain a direct focus. In order to be an executive, you must have that charisma so people will follow you, and not only follow you, will want to follow you. You must be confident in your communication as well as your posture when speaking to others when you meet those and meeting those local connections. You must have credibility. And when I reference credibility, it's fulfilling your promise, being true to what you say and being true to what you believe in. Last but not least, when you make those local connections, think about the clarity in speaking and speaking succinctly. I like to say a rule of 10. You should be able to make a statement in 10 words or less. So when you make those local connections, think about your composure, your charismatic personality, be confident within yourselves, ensure that you have credibility, and be clarity in speech. Next slide, please. After the who and the what, now where? Where should we meet in greeting the community? I have 4 things that I think are important when you greet the community. That is, develop your character. Give essence of your identity. Show off who you are. Not only in speaking, but that in the local public and going out and meeting, understand people. Show the individuals that you are abundance of character and character is within yourself. Not only that, I would like for you to mind your attitude. Always understand that when you enter the room as an executive, a beginning executive, a middle executive, or that of a senior executive, that you are an influencer. Influencer about the norms, influencer about people within your community, definitely within your school, and most importantly, influencer with those of student athletes. You need to make sure you master competency. Be proficient not only within your field, but be proficient in the skills that you possess. Being at this level, you must have some skills, some hidden skills that you have that you can share with others, as well as proficiency within the field. Integrity is always the purpose of what we're doing. Thoughts and actions based on your values and not that of personal gains. People can clearly see when you're out for self and not out for others. So in review and greeting the community, make sure your character is shown first and foremost. Make sure your attitude is shown by the influence that you provide to others within your community and within those of the student athletes. Be the master of competency. Understand the skill set that you bring that leads to an expertise within the field of athletics, and always make sure integrity is shown. Next slide, please. In developing the who, the what, and the where, I also need you to understand why. Why is there scuttlebucket? In the South, scuttlebucket is the uncensored noise that goes around. You know, when you first get the job, you heard about he or you heard about she, and you're trying to formulate, or others trying to formulate opinions about others. But I want you to understand that no one has ever made themselves great by showing how small someone else is. Everything that we judge in others is something within ourselves that we don't want to face. So understanding this judgment mentality that some often have, make sure we keep that in the back of our minds and not that of the forefront. Also, if your presence doesn't make an impact, then obviously your absence won't make an impact either, won't make a difference. So you must be impactful. Your presence is impactful. And remember, you are that of the influencer. Being a positive in a negative situation is not naive, but being a positive in a negative situation shows true leadership within an individual. So my advice was stay clear of the scuttlebucket and forge a path for your own. Next slide, please. Understanding the who, the what, the where, and the why. Now, to what degree do I sacrifice in creating this executive path? Making sure you take into account personal and family matters. Understand the importance of social interaction and how others may view you and how you are viewed by others. Make sure you always keep your eyes on the prize to ensure that you have future opportunities. And one way to sum it all up, being a son of a grandson of my grandfather was a minister, understand the fruit of the Spirit. And what I mean by the fruits of the Spirit, make sure you show love, you show joy, you show peace, you understand patience, that you possess that kindness and goodness within yourself, that your faithfulness to what your skill set and your abilities to be gentle, but last but not least, have self-control. As Nike says, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. I believe the next presenter will be that of Dr. Hendricks.
Okay, now we're going to move toward mid-year considerations. Next slide, please. Dr. Williams talked about realizing who you are. And so now I'm going to ask just Who are you? Some people have it and some people don't. When we talk about charisma, executive presence, the equivalent of professional charisma is what makes certain professionals stand out from the crowd. It drives respect of junior associates, collaboration from colleagues, and helps propel a professional up the power ranks in an organization. Yet a discussion around executive presence is often focused on what executive presence is, not rather than on what it is. It is not just about how one looks or dresses. It is not only about powerful communication and exceptional presentation skills. While it is usually found in leaders, it goes beyond leadership. Oscar Wilde had once famously said, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." And perhaps there is no closer definition than their closer definition to this. Hard Next slide, please. When you walk into a room, you know who has executive presence and who does not. It is something people see very quickly. You either exude executive presence or you do not. You're either drawn to pay attention to someone or you're not. Some people make their way to the C-suite because of their executive presence, even though they're not always the best leaders. Unfortunately, many good leaders do not because they just don't have it. Executive presence grows with heightened confidence and self esteem. They are not the same thing. Confidence is being capable, self esteem is how you feel about your worthiness and value. We build confidence by intentionally challenging ourselves and regulating our emotions in the moment. Take risks that matter. We build self esteem by accepting ourselves with all our imperfections. This means that you have to know and understand the goal, but focus on being your best without preoccupation with the outcome of your performance or people's judgment of you. Next slide, please. So, I want to pose a few guiding questions. As you look in terms of creating your executive presence in mid career, first one is, what is my ideal job? What inspires me about that role? How does that job reflect my strengths? What are my high impact goals? How do I want the world to be different because of me? What are my core values? Do my core values really reflect who I am? Do they fill my heart with joy? What are my innate strengths? Does my ideal job rely on these natural talents? What are the executive presence expectations of a person in my ideal role? Am I willing to build a presence equal to what's needed in this role? And what are the gaps between my current presence and the presence needed for my ideal role? Have I really asked for feedback from others? Next slide, please. Now, want to think about that a little bit. You know you have high executive presence when you do what you believe is right in the face of controversy. Step outside of what is comfortable to risk the unknown. Have the ability to admit your mistakes and learn from them. And you don't need outside validation because your internal satisfaction and self acceptance are enough. Next slide. You know you have low executive presence when you modify your behavior based on what other people think. Play it safe, freeze when you feel judged, hold back because it isn't fair or not the right time, and avoid risk. Deny mistakes, cover them up, blame others, or hope to remedy the problem before anyone notices. Dismiss compliments offhandedly because you don't feel you deserve them or the attention makes you uncomfortable. Remember, we are all a work in progress. Next slide, please. It's important to understand that executive presence equals your brand. People often refer to executive presence as charisma or the X factor, or sometimes refer to historical greats who are famed by attracting popularity through their presence alone. However, sometimes none of this is really helpful. So, how do we begin to embody charisma when it is such a vague term and could mean different things to different people? Executive presence is an art, like negotiating skills or acting. It's fundamentally about developing your own original voice. It's an art because it's deeply personal and must be refined and mastered over time through experimentation, failure, and repeated execution. The winning thread that runs through each of these tools is you. Your originality sits at the core of your ability to communicate authentically and powerful. So continually nurture and refine yourself, your voice, and your inner strength. Executive presence is inherently a developmental process of daily emotional weightlifting, a process of becoming your real self when a lot of times it's easier and more tempting to just run with the herd and jump on the bandwagon. Most of the time, that's mediocrity. Next slide, please. So, how do you get to this brand you? We're going to discover brand you. Next slide, please. In my view, executive presence is a critical mix of the following ingredients, traits, and behaviors. We've heard this: confidence, demonstrating the way you speak, behave, and engage that you believe in yourself and in your ability to succeed and thrive. Authority, possessing the power and influence to make things happen, and also serving as an authority about the area you're responsible for. This includes possessing a mastery of the key information necessary to make effective decisions. Strong communication, speaking and listening in ways that move the discussion forward, and fostering a space where diverse ideas are appreciated and embraced. Contribution, being comfortable bringing new thoughts, ideas, and innovations to the table and going out on a limb where necessary to think outside of the box and share unconventional ideas that may lead to growth. Holding your own, being able to stand your ground when challenged and present coherent arguments for why you see things as you do. Calmness and balance, not appearing nervous, but rather seeming self assured and calm and in control. Leadership, understanding the role you play as the leader in sharing your vision and purpose, but at the same time, being comfortable serving as the consummate team player and helping others shine for the great work that they're doing. Emotional strength, demonstrating strong boundaries and not becoming defensive or unhinged when others clash with you and push back hard on your ideas and comments. Next slide, please. So, what is your personal brand? A personal brand is the total experience of someone having a relationship with you, with who you are, and what you represent as an individual and as a leader. Think about what this means to you. Let that simmer. I want you to go back and ask yourself, and then ask a close, trusted friend who you know will tell you the truth. What is the total experience of having a relationship with you like? Next slide, please. So, what is your personal brand? Take time to write down the top 5 things you would expect others to experience, and then have a close friend do the same. You know, who you think you are, what you actually do and say, and then also taking into account the perceptions of others. Next slide, please. Now, how do you create this brand you? Your image is so important. Take the time to invest in professional photos. That is huge. How you walk, how you talk, what you say, what you look like. Though these things sometimes can be minor, they also can be major. Social media goes without saying. We all know the importance of it and the importance of what we look like on social media. Blogs, videos, podcasts, we all want our voice to be heard, but we have to be mindful sometimes of what we say and how we say it. Be sure that you get your name on something. Authorship is important. You, I'm not the best writer, and I don't proclaim to be, but I've had to sit down and force myself to do it enough because it is important that when someone Googles my name, that they see that not only have I the ability to speak and talk and lead, but also I can write. As you talk about brand you, all of those things come into play, and you are branding yourself as you author various articles, be that with a faculty member, be that on your own with your own research. Take the time to do it. Next slide, please. Again, pay attention to your day-to-day operations. What is it operation you incorporated? How do you handle issues from day to day? Be real with yourself and others. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. It's okay. Vulnerability breeds authenticity. Be transparent. Make sure that when people see you, they know exactly what they're getting. Again, it's all about you. Next slide, please. Take time and put your plan together. Pay attention to how you show appreciation to others. Do you appreciate the person on campus that's in the cafeteria, the person on campus who's cleaning the buildings? All of these things matter. How do you do that? This is called building your brand in your space, and you will be surprised who else pays attention. So when are you going to start this, and what exactly are you going to do? But write it down, write the vision, and make it plain. Next slide, please. So just wanted to give you kind of a visual on when we talk about the personal branding formula, because this all goes into executive presence. So of course it's your mind, your heart, and those tools and skills that you put in your tool chest. You add those to all the things that people experience about you, be that social media, things that you're reading, how you speak, what you look like. All of these things matter. And in today's world, you got to be able to be Googled and see what happens. So there's you, and then there's your strategy. All right? Executive presence, your personal brand. Of course, it's not based on any set formula. This is just a guide. It is there within you to be developed and sharpened through introspection, learning, and sometimes failure, but absolutely always success. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Sharon Beverly, who will talk about the experienced administrator.
Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. And so now we're talking about the administrator who has a bunch of years underneath them. They're very experienced and they are at the, let's say, 15 to 20 or plus years in their career. Next slide, please. I'm here to tell you, there's no magic wand that we can wave. There's no golden ticket. What we're going to try to do in this segment is just give you a few things to think about as you continue your executive presence. Next slide, please. So this is the senior level administrator. You've got multiple years of experience at that level. You may be the associate AD, you may be the senior associate, the deputy AD, you may be sitting in the chair. This is that point in your career where you feel like, hey, I think I've made it. You've got a great salary, your areas of oversight are running smoothly, and you know your worth. What we're going to have you think about a little bit is, how do you speak to people? Who are you surrounding yourself with? And yes, although you're confident, it is important as to what those that work with you think about your leadership and your leadership style. Next slide, please. So we're going to ask you to do a SWOT analysis of your personal life, because at this point, if you don't have your personal life in order, it's going to spill right over into your professional life. And again, that's going to hurt that executive presence. So what do you want your lifestyle to be like? And there's some things that you definitely should have in place by now. Please, please, please have liability insurance, especially in this day and age, and especially with what we're seeing going on in athletics in particular. Health insurance. Do you have sufficient health insurance, especially if you decide to take another path in life? How would that affect you? Long-term care insurance. It's much cheaper now than when you wait till you're in your 70s to all of a sudden start looking for some help. Look into these things right now in terms of that SWOT analysis of your personal life. And then financial health. Any president, any institution, any board of trustees that's going to hire you wants to know that you have your personal finances in order. So, ladies and gentlemen, check those credit scores, please. It will be a part of the background check, and you want to make sure that you're coming through it top notch. And then a durable power of attorney. If you don't know what that means, I really encourage that you Google it, because it's more than just a power of attorney. It also is going to take care of medical and financial. And those things are very important. So you are now at the point in your career where you're starting to look forward, not quite yet to retirement, but you are starting to look forward. And these are the things that we feel you need to put in place, because your executive presence means that you've also got that personal life in order. If not, that's going to be a worry on you, and that's going to affect the way you project yourself to others. Next slide, please. So you're pondering the next steps. And what are those next steps? It could be possibly that you're looking for a bigger school. It could be that you're considering changing divisions, going from Division 3 to Division 2. Maybe you're at Division 1, but you're at a small Division 1, and you're starting to wonder, how do I evaluate moving to a bigger school? Maybe you're considering staying at your present institution and just a title change with more responsibility. or possibly moving to another institution, moving from assistant, associate, or a VP position. Or maybe you're considering a different area of higher ed altogether and going into being a dean or an area in student affairs. There are a lot of steps that you could be pondering at this time in your career and that you would have to take into effect as you think about that executive presence. What pieces do you need to have in place? Next slide, please. So how do you define excellence or success? That's going to be critical in maintaining and improving that executive presence. So again, we want another SWOT analysis. Where are you in your career? As the athletics director, let's say, now we're sure that when you have a meeting with your direct report, when you have a meeting with your president, you're on time. You're sitting in that office and you're waiting for him and her. But when you run the meetings, how are you running them? Are you showing up late, expecting everyone to wait on you? That doesn't give a very good executive presence. What is it that you're really trying to do? How are you viewed by your colleagues? Would they say that you're helpful to them? Would they say that they can depend on you? Are you capable of making others around you shine? Those things are very important because although, again, you may be confident in your space, it is important of how others see you in terms of that executive presence. And being an effective leader means knowing your purpose. You've got to know who you are, you've got to know what you stand for, and you've got to hold the line on that. And sometimes that's not easy to do. Sometimes it means you may have to walk away from something, walk away from a great opportunity because it cuts against what you yourself stand for. So you have to think about that and you have to ponder that before you're in the midst of all the craziness. Next slide, please. So can you hold a conversation with presidents, the board, etc.? One of the best things I've ever got from a professional development session was attending one by the current AD at Michigan, Ward. Ward said, "Do you read?" He said he starts his day reading the Chronicle of Higher Education, that he reads the Harvard Business Review. I love to also read the Atlanta Constitution, the New York Times, whatever paper you've got, and your local paper. Are you well read? Can you speak about things other than athletics? When you sit with your president, when you are with your board, can you only talk about what's going on within your department, which of course is important, but if you want them to truly see you as an executive, truly see your executive presence and have respect for what you can bring to the table, you've got to be able to speak broader than just athletics. So we challenge you, if you're not currently reading the Chronicle, read the Chronicle and not just the section that deals with what's going on with athletics. Look to see what's going on in higher education. Read the Harvard Business Review. Read other major publications out there and leadership books. Very, very important. Next slide, please. So in searching for this, I was trying to think, when we talk about the people that we surround ourselves with, the way we talk with people, the way we talk with our colleagues, I found something that was listed, words matter. And it's 10 incredibly useful phrases you should use to boost your career. The harmful one first, and then the helpful one. And these are just a few, but there's a really nice listing there. So if you get a chance, Google it and read them. And the first is, how many times have we heard this? Let me tell you how we do things here. Does that make you feel like you want to be a part? No. But maybe the better way to say that is, thanks for your advice. I'll keep that in mind. Now you've made that person feel like they're a part of your team. Or, we've never done that before. Again, now I'm sitting there saying, oh, gee, does that mean this was a bad idea? And how is that person going to hear that and receive that? Because again, as we communicate, we can't just talk the way we want people to hear something. We've got to also keep in mind the person or the audience and how are they going to absorb that. So rather than saying, we've never done that before, say, let's try a new method. It may be better. Okay, that makes me think you've weighed what I've brought to the table, and we're just going to try something else as well. How about my former boss is a total idiot? Probably not the best thing to say, but I loved this one. My previous job gave me a lot of experience. Are there some people that can relate to that? And this is how we do things at my previous job. But nobody wants to hear that. How about let's try a method that we know to be effective? So I really thought those different sort of helpful phrases were very, very relevant to our topic for today. And I do encourage you to look up those. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So we all know about mentors. I'm sure we've got plenty of them in your toolbox, right? People on speed dial that you call when things are going poorly, and well, you want to share it. I know personally, and a lot of us probably, Dr. Alfreda Goff. I call her Dr. Goff because she deserves a doctorate with everything that she's done to help people along the way. Dr. Ray Jorgensen at the Leadership Institute is another one for me. He's outstanding. So mentors are great. You know, they counsel us, they're role models, they can be friends and colleagues. But sponsors are needed because they put you on the path to power and influence. A sponsor is a person that doesn't know your shortcomings. They don't know where the bodies are buried, as they say. They only know what you bring forward. They only see that executive presence as you walk into a room, and they log in the back of their head, when I have an opening for an athletics director, I'm going to look up this young man or young woman. I think they really are on the ball. I like the way they presented themselves. I liked the way they represented their institution. Those are sponsors. Sponsors are not the person that you get on the phone and call when you need advice. They're not the ones that are going to be out there trying to help you put the pieces in place that you need to keep your career moving in the right direction. That's not a sponsor. That's a mentor. But the sponsor is the one that has the influence to make that call to get you that job. They're the ones who are connected to that next level of opportunities. So maybe for you, it's that vice president that might end up being a sponsor that you just happen to bump into at the NCAA convention and have a little chat with at a round table. And you were ready with your executive presence. And now all of a sudden, they make a little note, they're going to help you. Next slide, please. Sponsor, a person of power and influence. This is a strategic alliance. You do not have to like your sponsor. This is not someone that you're going to be hanging out with, but you need to be able to trust him or her. It's an influential person who takes a vested interest in your career. It's going to help you move it forward. A good book on this, if you'd like, is Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor by Sylvia Ann Hewitt. Next slide, please. So we want you to remember to do an honest self-assessment. Evaluate your personal stance, including finances. Ponder what the next steps might look like for you. What executive presence have you established? And how do you change or strengthen it depending upon what you find in that personal SWOT analysis? And talk with trusted colleagues and mentors for honest feedback and find some sponsors. And lastly, have you ever recorded yourself and heard what you sound like when you talk with colleagues and friends? Have you videoed yourself to see what you look like? Little things like this are important, especially when you are doing video conferences or if you're on the phone for audio. You still want to exude that executive presence to represent yourself positively. Next slide, please. Thank you. Darnell, you can jump back in for us.
All right, thank you, Dr. Beverly. Definitely appreciate that. And you mentioned Frida Golf, and I've learned so much from her myself. And one thing that I definitely take away is the each one, reach one, and that's something that's definitely I hold close, and I know it's made an impact. So this is the opportunity for the questions and answer session. And I know we have a few questions that I'm going to throw your way. So the first question that we have is regarding podcasts. So do you think podcasts can serve as an alternative way to be well read?
Dr. Hendricks, you want to jump in and take that one?
Sure. Uh, Absolutely. And many of us, if you're commuting, and I'm in New Hampshire, so in order to go somewhere to get my hair done, I've got to drive an hour and 15 minutes. So I have really gotten into podcasts and books on CD and things like that. So it's still information gathering. It's still a way to continue to develop yourself. So absolutely, when you're traveling, and which most of us do, right? Either by plane or we're getting on the bus with those students or what have you. So that is a great way if that works for you. And some of us are better auditory learners anyway. So that is an awesome way to do that as well.
Awesome. And as a follow to that, are there any podcasts that you may suggest?
And I knew you were going to ask me that. And honestly, I'm just getting into podcasts. I've really been concentrating more on books at this point. So I'm just starting there. But I can tell you what we can do is put some up on our social media, and we can let you know what we're listening to. But I'll tell you, one of the books that I'm reading right now is John Gordon. I'm really looking and reading his series of books. And so one of them is The Power of a Positive Team. And that is a book actually that Dr. Beverly shared with myself and Dr. Williams. And I'm in the process of reading. It's a short book, but it's a very good book. And of course, Michelle Obama's Becoming. That's another book. And you'd be surprised the leadership lessons and the sponsor lessons that are in that book. Their connection with Valerie Jarrett and how that all happened. But there was a sponsor of Michelle Obama that got her to that with Valerie Jarrett. So there are a number of things like that that I would tell you that I read. But here's another book. It's by Joel Manby, and it's called Leading with Love. And so if you've not read that, that is an awesome, awesome book and a great way of how you can connect what you know to what you feel and your core values, and really encouraging about standing in your own truth and doing what's right. So there are a couple of books, but we'll definitely put up some podcasts on our social media and share that with everyone.
Absolutely. And Dr. Beverly, a question that came through, how hard is it to transition from athletics into another role in higher education, such as dean or assistant or associate VP? Would you recommend an executive coach for someone who's looking to do that?
Did I hear executive coaching? I think that it's not as difficult as we might believe. And all it takes, again, to go back to what we talked about, that SWOT analysis is really necessary. Just as you would look at other opportunities within athletics, and what do? We go to the advert, we look to see everything that's going to be needed. There are advertisements out there for assistant vice president of student affairs, vice president of student affairs, dean, associate deans, and start to look at the experiences that you need to fill those positions. Of course, we didn't talk about this because we kind of figured everyone understands, but you must have your master's. You need that. You need some additional training in terms of academia, especially if you are looking for the academic side of the house. When Dr. Hendricks talks about writing, publishing anything, when we start talking about publishing things, we go to Dr. Williams and we do this because he is our he's our go-to on that. But it is important that you write. Athletics Business Magazine, I believe, is a great one. I've written a couple of articles for them. Dr. Hendricks has written a couple of articles for them. So again, just to summarize, I think you need to assess what you're seeing out there in terms of qualifications. I think you need to start to look a little bit more of being visible on your campus outside of just athletics, maybe attending your faculty senate, know your FAR, have some conversations there to start to change the way people perceive you so that it's not just about athletics. But it's
Absolutely.
doable.
Absolutely. And as a follow-up to that, could you unpack exactly what an executive coach does, and can anyone be an executive coach?
Well, of course, I want to say not anyone can be an executive coach, and we do that with Beverly and Associates. I've got 4 or 5 executive clients right now. So what an executive coach will do is a little bit of what we talked about. They're going to really make you do a hard self-assessment of where you are. What are your shortcomings? What are your strengths? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? Where are you looking to go in your life? And the first thing that I do with my executive coaching clients is to say to them, we got to first look at your personal, because I'm very serious about that. You've got to have your personal life in order before you start to do anything else, because one's going to spill into the other whether we want to or not. So we look at your personal life, we make sure those pieces are in place, or we come up with a game plan. Former basketball coach, we come up with a game plan for how we're going to effectively put the pieces in place that we need, and then we start to talk about where do you want to be. When we do presentations, we say, okay, we want you to think to yourself, where do you want to be in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and how do you accomplish that? And then once you've accomplished those goals, where do you want to be now in the next 3, 4, 5? Short term, we put those pieces in place so that you can continue to get your career moving on board. And I guess the difference between an executive coach and the mentor is your executive coach, when you call, he or she's going to pick up. A mentor doesn't always have to pick up. They got other priorities. So, bunch of positives there.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Williams,
Yes,
a question came in. So there's a saying that's out there. You dress for the job that you want. Is there any truth to that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
that's always true to it. Being in that position, you always have to remember that you're an influencer. And most influencers, they have to look the part. So even now, if you're a student or in graduate school, you still need to look to the part. You dress for the job that you want, not the job that you currently have.
Absolutely. So let me ask this question. We talked about, Dr. Beverly talked about the SWOT analysis. You talked about SWOT analysis of the personal life. And you mentioned mentors and sponsors. What kind of accountability should one have when looking at a SWOT analysis? Meaning you could put it together, but who's going to hold you accountable? Should someone have an accountability partner, or should it be another athletic director or a person in a position that you're trying to reach? Who's going to hold you accountable for that SWOT analysis?
That's a good question. And I think there's really no pat answer. And what I mean by that is, for some people, they're going to be able to do that SWOT analysis and they're going to follow that like it's their roadmap to success, which it really is. But then you've got others that are going to need that help. When you talked about an executive coach, that is someone that could help them with that. And maybe that's the person that really needs an executive coach. So I think it's really going to depend on when you really do that honest self-assessment. Am I going to be able to move this forward? I liken it to, and this is personal right now, I liken it to when you're trying to lose weight. Some people don't need a partner. They can put their mind to it and they do it. And then you hear some folks need a partner so that they can have that accountability. So that's going to come down to what works best for you. And I guess if you don't know which, if you try it one way and it doesn't work, you better try it the other way.
Absolutely. And we'll take, in essence of time, we'll take this last question. And Dr. Hendricks, going to transition it to you. So are there any organizations or conferences outside of athletics you may have found valuable to your career?
Oh, I think there are lots actually. And it really, when you talk about what you want to do and maybe that direction that you want to go in terms of that VP or AVP or even being a chief of staff, or if you want to go in on the academic side. So there's so many. So you have NASPA, which of course is student affairs
Hmm.
professionals, and education. You know, the big one is AERA. And then there's Blacks in higher education, there are women in higher education. So there's so many conferences that you can go to that will help you broaden your horizons. And I'll tell you, those other conferences, especially when you talk about Blacks in higher ed, women in higher ed, those conferences are looking for information about athletics. So
Hmm.
submit your information, submit that proposal to be a speaker or have a poster, because that's going to help build your portfolio and it's going to show your breadth and the depth of where you can go in higher ed. So I would strongly encourage you to get involved with things outside of athletics that line up with where it can take you. But again, those are other spaces that you can find the sponsors. Those are other spaces where presidents will be, board members, provosts. Those are the kinds of people that you need. And I am a direct, I guess, would we say, recipient or whatever the case may be of those being in those other spaces, because I
Hmm.
became really good friends and had sponsors who were presidents, and that really changed the whole game for me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And as we bring this webinar to a close, on behalf of Moaa and its leadership, we definitely want to thank each and every one of you. This has been an exciting webinar, and definitely excited to have you all. For those that are watching today, if you haven't already done so, please be sure to follow at Beverly Associates. That's at BEVERLY and Moaa Diversity One on Twitter. Uh, Make sure that you do that following the webinar, and please support them as they are here to support us. Again, if you have any questions regarding Moaa membership in general, please don't hesitate to contact either Alexis or Julie in the national office. As a reminder, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you all at the Moaa Symposium in Orlando, Florida in June. Thank
Yes.
you all again for being here today.
Thank
See you
you.
later.
Bye-bye.